Hey guys, welcome back. This is my third build of the league, or actually, I think it was it was my fourth build, but I'm skipping over my third build temporarily. I only took it to the 70s, and it really needs some more levels before I go into it. So instead, I'm going to cover this one. This one's still only level 84, but it's definitely high enough to see how effective it is, and it's also probably so far, uh, well, it's probably my favorite build of the league, just from a standpoint. It does all the things right. It's a nice balanced build. It has, whereas before this, I was using characters, that you kind of had to just avoid taking the damage. This character is the polar opposite of that. This character is extremely tanky and can just, it feels nice playing a tanky character after playing very glass cannon-y characters. But it still has a neat way of applying damage and some neat mechanics. It's combining multiple ideas I've had in the past and put into builds, and I love. There's very little I love more than getting to combine memes together. So this is actually a perfect agony build that uses Vernastra as along with Lancing Steel and Restless Ward and Will Clash. There's a mashup for you. We're abusing a mechanic that just got buffed with the introduction of the new Grand Spectrum skill gems. So the first thing I want to cover here on this character is get this out of the way. This isn't your league starter. It takes at least 2, but probably 3, plus 1 to minimum power charge Grand Spectrums. And the reason for this is we're combining what we're doing to get our max block is we are utilizing Will Clash. And Will Clash gives you plus 5% chance to block spell damage per power charge, but you lose all power charges when you block. But you don't lose them if you don't have any to lose, because your minimum is your maximum. So, by abusing that, we can easily get our, between, depending on how you're doing this, between 40 and 50% spell block right there out the gate, which is just a huge deal, because then all you have to do is throw a Tempest shield on top of it and you're capped out. And very little in this game feels better than max spell block. And on top of that, we just throw in 50% spell suppression, because why not? It costs us 4 points to do so. Or is it 5? It's 5. Okay. Well, no, 4, actually. Yep, it's just the 1, 2, 3, 4 here, because the Spellmaster we're actually using for crit chance. I forgot about that. Yep, so... So, talking about a little bit more about the build. So, how does the rest of it work? So, yes, we're getting spell block from Will Clash, and that's great. But why all the rest of this crap? Well, we're also abusing Masterful Form to give us your maximum endurance charges is equal to your maximum frenzy. And we're abusing that along with Badge of the Brotherhood, which makes it so that our maximum frenzy is equal to our maximum power. What this effectively does is allows you to only scale your power charges, and then every other charge is max. Frenzied and endurance charges max values are the same as your power charge max values. But not only that, there is no way to make it less than that. And the reason that is important is because Replica Restless Ward here allows us to get all of these bonuses from Frenzy and Endurance charges, with the downside that we have -2 maximum Endurance and Frenzy charges. That doesn't apply to you using this setup. Those -2 maximum Frenzy and Endurance charges just do. There is no downside. They don't apply because the other abilities overrule this. You can't reduce a blanket statement like, oh, your Frenzy charges is equal to your maximum Endurance charges. It just doesn't work. So right now, this build is using 8 of all charges. It has full uptime for 8 of all charges, and it feels really great. I mean, you generate them very quickly with the charge. I'm not super happy with the Frenzy and Endurance charge generation, not because it's not effective. It's super effective. I'm using Ceaseless Feast to do it, and you build them very, very quickly. That's not a problem. It would be nice to have the glove slot open for other means, that's all. Ceaseless Feast doesn't come with a lot of additional bonuses to this build because it's nice to have the extra physical damage, but corrosion doesn't really help all that much because we're focused on poison damage. So, we're getting about half the benefit of those gloves, but it is a neat use case for them because Lancing Steel is amazing for using Ceaseless Feast. Lancing Steel is one of the fastest hitting skills in the game. There's a good chance you've never even seen it used because it's pretty meme, I believe. I've never really seen the community use it very much. I've done similar builds like this in the past that were also meme that just, it's not mechanically the greatest skill, I would say. But anyways, moving on. So we've got 8, and we could bump this up to 9 very easily of all charges, and potentially even beyond that, depending on how much you want to invest. But for the sake of it, right now on this build, we have 24 charges. And we have 10 of those all the time, or 9 of them all the time, because we have 8 power charges minimum, and we have 1 frenzy charge minimum. So what is the rest of this build doing? Well, the replica Restless Ward is giving us like 1,300 health regen, and also it's giving us 48% increased movement speed. Both those things are just, fantastic quality of life. They make us that much tankier. A Restless Ward also has a good chunk of evasion on it as well as energy shield, so it's just a nice bonus. Then the other thing that I should touch on is what is going on with this. And honestly, when I get a few more points, I'm going to reinvest and have another large cluster like this one over here. Well, we've got a couple things. So what we're doing is we're grabbing Disease Vector because this is a poison build, and Disease Vector is extremely nice for any poison build. There are so many Arch Nemesis monsters that are much less tanky than they actually seem, than they should be, just because they have ridiculous health regen. So Disease Vector completely nullifies it. It's the best way in the game to nullify that regen because it just doesn't allow them to regen at all. It's not even a minus percentage, just no regen. But then more importantly, we have Fan of Blades. And unfortunately, Fan of Blades is a little expensive due to some of the meta builds at the moment that tend to use it. But we want to use it, and we want to get also a couple megalomaniacs that also have it. And that's the cool thing about Fan of Blades is that you can get it on the large, and then you can also get it on the megalomaniac. So you can get 3 in a cluster like this. Or potentially, if if you want to go the voices route, I guess you can also get 3 that way, but that's just a lot more money to do the same thing. That's why it's nice that this is a large cluster passive. So and I'll get to the reason in a second why we're stacking that and why we're using Dying Sun and we're using all the sources of additional projectile as we can. The other thing that we're doing is we are grabbing as much as we can of crit multiplier and crit chance. I haven't invested terribly into it yet on this character because he's only 84. You can see a couple spots where I grab it, but it's more so on the gear right now. You can see in the top left my crit multi says 365, but that's before figuring in a couple of conditionals. It actually goes up quite a bit more than that, but in any case, the reason that we are getting additional projectiles is because Lancing Skill has a neat little line on it. And that line, let me see if I can pull it up on the gem. So I'm using Anomalous Lancing Steel. It's just, I think, probably the nicest of the Lancing Steels. It just gives you more targeting range because the skill automatically targets your enemies, and with the additional range, it targets them quite a bit off the screen, and that's nice. But the line I was talking about is clusters, hits after the first... okay, my bad. Fires 50% more projectiles per steel shard consumed. And typically, if you have at least 4 shards, it will at most consume up to 4 shards. And if you have the 4, it will consume them. So 200% more projectiles is what you're getting. And so the more projectiles you stack, the more that get multiplied by... in this case, by 3, because it's 200% more. So, right now, how I have it set up, if I chug my Dying Sun, it has, I need to actually have the steel shards to do it. Let me kill a guy, just use my Dying Sun. Alright, there we go. So, 39 projectiles is when you're killing monsters, is typically about what you have. Now, you can have more than that very easily, because greater multiple projectile support is great for this build, because it's less projectile damage, but, 4 additional projectiles, which gets multiplied a lot in this case. And same thing with lesser. You could stack lesser in this build as well and put lesser on top of this. I don't think it's necessary, which is why I don't have the lesser in here as well. Almost 40 projectiles is nice. Obviously, the more you can, the better, but there's a point where you run into dealing with your damage. So on the damage side of things, we're running Cruelty, Increased Damage Support, Critical Strike Affliction, GMP, Analysis Steel, and right now I have Vicious Projectile Support. Honestly, it's probably better to use like Awakened Chaos Damage in here, would be my guess. I haven't tried optimizing this yet. I haven't had a need to. It does pretty well as it is. The other way we're getting our 8 max is we're allocating overcharge over here, and we're grabbing the power charge over here, infused, and we've got a will clash with +1 power charge, max power charges, which is pretty cheap actually. I think it was like 30 chaos or something a while ago. And then a Malachi's Loop, which comes with 2 max power charges. And the other thing about this build, why this all meshes together nicely, is that normally you would lose your power charges on reaching max power charges, and normally this would shock you. Neither of those things happens because you're always max. You never reach max. You're already max, and you can't lose your max. Therefore, You always get the +2. You never lose them. It's always good times. But as a result of all of this, what we've and I probably didn't touch on the fact of we're using Vera Nostra because we're abusing Vera Nostra's property that it counts as all one-handed melee weapon types in order to utilize Fan of Blades. Because you see here it says Fan of Blades while wielding a claw or dagger. Normally you would not be able to use a Fan of Blades with any other weapon in the game and use Lancing Steel. Vera Nostra is the only exception to this rule. It also allows us to grab all of these useful best use case. Like you can use every mastery in the game as you like. Like here's one. My character has Rage, so I'm using Rage on a projectile build because I can get it for very little cost, just taking it with the Axe Mastery node. I can get 120% crit chance with swords, and that counts. I can get all of this extra block chance with swords here that just happens to be along the way. There's multiple others. There's some other interesting ones. You can get all damage with maces and scepters inflicts chill. I tested this. This works. You can apply chill with Vera Nostra through Mace Mastery. All those things work great. We also have crazy damage from things like Disciple of the Slaughter, which gives us an extra 80% because 8% increase per frenzy charge, and then we have 3% increase per... This node alone is, 24 times 3 for us. So, it's not too bad. We're talking about 80. Anywhere that we can pick up a node like that, it's 80 damage. I don't think it's worthwhile to get the one on the left here because these don't do much for us, and 4 points for 80%. Another thing I like to note is something that a lot of people don't realize. Whenever there are, anybody that's looked into Vera Nostra realizes this, but most people these days have no reason to look into Vera Nostra. When these nodes here on dagger and claw damage or any of the cluster any of the cluster gem setups like this that have separate lines for different kinds of weapons. In this case, there's a separate line between claw attacks deal 12% increased damage and dagger attacks deal 12% increased damage. When it is on two separate lines like that, they both apply to Vera Nostra. This is not a 12% damage increase. This is a 24%. So every one of these small nodes here is 24%. So you can find areas that have double effectiveness like that. It's always been like that for Vera Nostra. The downside is you have to use Vera Nostra. And Vera Nostra is not a very high DPS weapon. It's better than a lot of one-handers, but the really killer part is the attack speed. The default, I think, is 1.3, which is why I have it corrupted here with the highest amount of attack speed that you can have, which is 7% to bring it up to 1.39, which is, whoop-dee. But, it's something. It's not terrible. And dagger masteries and things are great. 15% more maximum physical attack damage with a single point. We don't have to invest in poison at all because we're using Vera Nostra. Critical strikes with daggers poison the enemy. That means that all we have to do is, do what we're already trying to do since we're using Perfect Agony and get as close to 100% on crit rate. And my POB build for this is at 92% without further terrible investment. Because we're a Slayer, which means we get this node here for the base 8%. And it's pretty easy to get close to 100% crit when you've got a base of 8%. Plus that gives us crit multi. This whole setup works really well. Headsman works really well with a build that hits so many times per second. You're going to get maximum effectiveness out of something like Headsman with a build like this. It's really great. we've got a setup here of flasks to maximize, like I said, Dying Sun, obviously, for the additional projectiles. The others are just typical stuff. We've got a diamond flask here with, well, this is the optimal setup in my opinion. You've got a diamond flask that gains flasks charges on a critical strike and also has increased critical strike chance. So it's like 150% extra critical strike chance right there. Plus, it's used automatically and it gains charges on crit, which we're critting all the time. And Lancing Steel is one of these skills that it's like multi-strike. You use it, and if you crit, it's all crit. So all 40 hits, or however many you have, crit. It's great. I mean, when that happens, you refill your entire flask in one attack. Also, our projectiles are all piercing because we get to come over here and take these nodes. It's pretty effective for taking out places like Delve or just massive amounts of enemies in general. I'll roll a clip real quick of what gameplay looks like for this. So here's a Delve. And you can tell it's not super deep or anything. It's only, 98 or something. So the monster level's 79. But you got to keep in mind, my character's only like level 83 in this clip.
I can't do this to you.
But he doesn't really take damage. It's absurd the amount of punishment that he can take. And actually, since this video, I don't remember if I have it in this video or not. I don't know why I never had it in before. Immortal Call. There, it just went off. And if you notice, watch when my Immortal Call goes off. My endurance charges are back at max instantly. So you're constantly getting max value Immortal Calls. You get to use Withering Step constantly to reduce resistances because of Badge of the Brotherhood. This is a massive damage boost for this. I haven't optimized my auras. You can see I have a lot of... I still have 50% of my mana, so I've still got stuff to deal with there. Yes, I do have Tempest Shield on right now. I just make all that stuff invisible because I don't like most of the auras and stuff in this game. I just turn them off with invisible auras, in case you're wondering. But yeah, that's how delving looks on it. But it's pretty much the same anywhere. It's just an extremely tanky, high damage build. The last thing I guess I'll cover is I have a bit to show off of what the end game will look like for this, like the end investment. So I took the time to find what an extremely good Timeless Jewel would look like for a build like this. So if I take out this Grand Spectrum really quickly, and I stick this in here, I want you to... So not only, right away, you can see 10% chance to gain a Frenzy Charge on hit. That means that we can ditch the Ceaseless Feast, pretty much. I mean, no longer would I need... you've got it in a so right there. That's great. That's worthwhile. But one thing I want you to notice about this ridiculous jewel. We've got 10% increased damage per frenzy, 10% increased damage per frenzy, 8% more block spell damage, 8% armor per endurance, 10% more damage per endurance, 10% more damage for frenzy, 10% more damage for power, and 10% more damage for power. That is an absurd amount of increased damage in this area. And I've already done the POB workaround for the fact that, yeah, we won't have this block area here. That's the biggest hit. We have to make up for it elsewhere. And we don't have a little bit chunk of health here. But something to note is that this build has very little HP, and it doesn't matter anyways. The mitigation is great. You have a lot of evasion being turned into armor. You have a lot of spell suppression. You will in the later levels be able to max out both the block and spell block. You have Immortal Call full uptime with 8+ endurance charges. The easiest way of getting this last power charge on the tree instability would be to use, Blight Boots. The problem is, you should use the Spore one. Using the the ones on my other build that I just uploaded, you don't want to use any that make your movement speed fixed, because this build can feel extremely fast, and those boots cap your move speed out, which is why I'm not wearing them here, and why I don't have that 9th power charge, which is admittedly extremely easy to get. But right now I'm using these boots instead because I can still be a Zumi guy, and honestly, having 8 of every charge doesn't when the character's this effective, doesn't really matter to me. But anyways, pretty neat character that is combining a whole lot of different, maybe lesser known kind of mechanics between how we're exploiting charges and charge generation and Vera Nostra, along with Phantom Blades and a weird lesser used skill like Lancing Steel. So probably like I said, my favorite of the league so far as a result of that. If you have any questions about any particular mechanics here, let me know. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Have a good one.